We'll begin by booting up Openfiler. To begin with, let's just make sure that, in my case, I opted for NAT, a NAT adapter on the VM Workstation. I'm using a laptop, and I have 2 extra hard drives. So let's begin. Okay, so it's booting as we speak. This can take a while, so be patient. Okay, default is either root or Openfiler, all lowercase, no spaces. Okay. And then password would be just password, all lowercase, no spaces. Okay, not implemented. Then it's going to make you do it again. Now it's root, same thing, password, all lowercase, no spaces. Okay, now I am in. Now you can see that the web administration GUI shows an IP address that I can access it. If you don't have this, you may have a problem where in copying or somehow creating your VM that you have a difference. There's a difference between the MAC address of the VM and what VMware believes your MAC address is. Let me show you how to resolve that. So first, we're going to go and see what the MAC address is. Right. We'll get it. Okay. Third time's the charm. Sysconfig. See. Okay, so just to save some time, my path was etc to sysconfig to network scripts, and then I will actually view IFCFG Ethernet 0. Okay, so take note of the hardware address. Now, obviously, mine matches because there's no problem, but that's where you can find your hardware address. And now, if you want, now what you want to do is you want to compare this to what the hardware address is for your on workstation. So if you go and check your settings here, and you go into Network, Advanced, these need to match. If they don't, then you need to update this into VMware Workstation, reboot, and you'll have no problem. So that's how you fix that problem. I can look and see how many hard drives I have. If I look at, so if I go into volumes, block devices, you have the partition. Well, essentially that's for the OS, and then we have the 2 extra ones at 200 gigabytes. You would create a partition. So the only way that the disks can be useful is they have to be partitioned originally. So if we go into volume, check block devices, you would see block device management. You can see the different disks here, and they're all partitioned, right? But if you wanted to partition one, you'd have to click on here and go to the bottom, follow the defaults, and create your partition. So once the disks are partitioned, they can be virtualized i.e. they can be placed into a logical group. So if you go into volume groups, this one is created already, but you have VG volume group 1, and this is the size of it, because if you look at the disks, the partition disks, partition volumes, PV, you have one, or you have those, the two 200 gigabyte partition disks. Correction, the PV means physical volume, not partition volume, just so you know. So when we look at the logical volume that's been created, so that's the two extra 200 gigabyte hard drives, physical hard drives, they've been amalgamated into a logical volume, and now the volume itself can be partitioned into different volumes. So we have one DS2 for datastore 2, which is 2/3 of the entire amount, and then we have an ESX NFS volume right here. Next, we're going to go back to the ESX server and configure ESX for an iSCSI server. So looking at the virtual switch 0, we can see that on the switch topology here, we have a VM kernel adapter, management port essentially, which you can use to add storage traffic through the kernel port. But for this, we're actually going to create a separate switch to do it. So let's go ahead and create a storage switch. So I've created the switch. Now I'm going to create a port connection that can support the iSCSI port protocol. So I go to networking, VM kernel, next tab. It's right here. So we're going to add one and create it with a new port group connected to the storage switch. So to begin with, just like this, so new port group, storage switch VLAN 0. Let's create that. If we go back to the storage switch, we should have that VM kernel port connected. So, and we do. So this is what we're going to do to connect to iSCSI devices, and we'll need to remember the IP address of it. Now we're going to go back and set up the iSCSI server in Openfiler, so it can connect to the ESXi. So now we're going to set up an iSCSI target, which is going to be the server, and the client is going to be the ESX server. That's going to initiate the connection and try to get the storage access. So now first we have to go to services and make sure that the iSCSI is operating, which it is. So iSCSI target enabled and running. Then we go to the system page on Openfiler, scroll down to network access configuration right here. So this is actually, I don't think this is actually useful, so I'm going to remove this. Well, to remove it, I'd have to go into shares and remove the shares, so we just won't worry about that for now. So based on our IP address, 192.217, so it's 192.168.30, and it's 0/24, which is exactly what we have here. So that's already configured. This is because of previous labs, so I'm just making sure and checking it. But normally you would just add new, it would be a share, and then you would update it and you'd have it. Now we're going to set up the target information. So we're going to go to the volumes page. Would be iSCSI target. Okay, now this, the IQN, so that's the an ISC, so it's an iSCSI qualified name essentially. That's what it is. That's the connections address. So whenever you click add here, you're generating a new iSCSI target address, and they populate right here. So we got way too many, obviously, but this is what happens. So this is the one selected. Now we're going to go into LUN mapping. And LUN stands for logical unit number, just so you know. Each iSCSI target can have multiple logical unit numbers on it. So this number is the identity of the logical volume of the connection. And then we're going to go to a network ACL. And for this ESX, we're going to allow it because you have to allow the traffic. And we don't have chat authentication. Now we want to connect that server to the ESXi client. So I just finished here. I didn't change. So I didn't change anything. I just went back here. Storage. Then you only have one data store. That's the one that came with the ESXi. And now these are our adapters. We want to go to software iSCSI. It was disabled. I just enabled it. So the IQN, let's just make sure and see if it matches. Right, so this is the name and alias of VMware specifically. We don't use chat. Now we're going to add a port binding. No, we don't have a port binding. So the static target is the IQDN or whatever it is from this one. So that's what we want to. So I'm just going to add the address here. So 192. That's obviously the Openfiler. See what happens. Refresh. Now it's connected. It's online. If I go back here, yeah, so this is a whole list. That's the one that we have from before. So that's connected. Now you can see I have two data stores. This is the one, essentially that's the 2/3 of the entire volume. So this is the iSCSI volume. See capacity right here, 227. If I go into volumes, one volume group, right? See, 227, 133. That's the one, it's DS2. Okay, consider the logical unit number target. This here. Now we're going to see that into the ESXi server. I go storage here, devices. You can see disk. So I may have a different one because I might have generated more than one, but this is the one here. That's just from a previous lab, and somehow the mapping didn't disappear. Maybe I got to manually remove it. So this is the one here. If I go into storage, I can browse the data store right here. So I got the nostalgia. That's because it was previously moved there already, but I have access to it. Okay, just want to show you how you can actually create the data store from the mapping. It showed already because of previous labs that I've done, but if I go and create a data store here, and I create a new VMFS, I can choose, this is the one that we've just created, and I can go and select a name. Full disk. This probably formats the disk, however. Let's see what happened. So it's just me being picky. Okay. Yeah, right. So it formatted the disk. Previously I had nostalgia, now it just formatted the disk, but that's okay. Next, we're going to create an Openfiler NFS share. So instead of iSCSI, it's going to be NFS. It's the same idea though. So normally you would create a new volume with the remaining storage available on the logical volume. It's already been done. This is ESX NFS. If I go into Shares tab, you can see the NFS share appears. If I click on the share, NFS share, I can control the permissions. So it's going to be public access, and it's going to be NFS read and write. Now we should note the path. Now we'll connect the NFS share to the ESX server. So storage. New data store, we're going to choose NFS. It's going to be NFS 4, I believe. No, it's NFS 3. Name, so let's go with datastore 3. Server is the IP address. And then the share is the path. Let's create that. So that failed. Let's figure out why. I think I found it. It's because if I go into manage services on the Openfiler, NFS is not enabled. So the NFS server is not enabled. Let's try that again. So if I got my share here, everything should operate fine. Public, right? Okay, let's try it again, shall we? See, it worked. A little bit of troubleshooting goes a long way. So you can see this is the second part of that logical volume dedicated to NFS. Let's even browse it. So within the data store, ESX server uses a special file system called VMFS, which has the following features. It allows multiple physical hosts to read and write to the same storage account, the same storage simultaneously, and on-disk locking to ensure that the same virtual machine is not powered on by multiple servers. So if you wanted to move a VM, say a VM is in a data store and you wanted to move it to the other one, moving a VM. So we go to datastore 1. We can see it. We have nostalgia. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this. I'm going to move it to datastore 2. No longer in 1. It's now in 2, so it's moved. Now if you go back to the VM itself, nostalgia, it still thinks that so if you take nostalgia VM, which has now been moved to volume 2 or to datastore 2, take this and you look at it at the hard disk, it still shows that it's in 1. That's because what you have to do is you have to deregister the machine and then register it on the new one. Okay, so we unregister. Okay, and now we register. Register the machine. So to register the virtual machine, I was having problems. You could normally do it in edit, and then you would choose which data store. There's another way of doing it too, is you can go in storage specifically, and you can register a VM. And then in this case, it was nostalgia, which was already registered, and it's registered to number 2. Now if you look at the hard disk, datastore 2,